The HyperX Quadcast has been a popular gaming and streaming mic for years, and before the second generation came out, HyperX released the Quadcast S, which did not upgrade the internal components of the mic or really the physical design, but it added full-color RGB lighting. So for the Quadcast 2S, HyperX has done a little bit more to further differentiate it from the regular Quadcast 2. Let's take a look and see if it's a worthy upgrade. Before we dive in, I want to mention that this video is not sponsored and I purchased the Quadcast 2S myself. I do have an Amazon affiliate link in the description for you if you're interested in picking up the Quadcast 2S and you'd like to support this channel. Alright, so first off, let me just point out that I do have a video comparing the Quadcast 2 to the Quadcast 2S. So if that's really what you're interested in, if that's the only thing you're really looking for, I will put a link to that video in the description. What we have here that has not changed is the 4 different polar patterns, which I'm using the cardioid polar pattern because that's generally the best choice for a single person talking. But you also have omnidirectional, bidirectional, also called figure of 8, and stereo. The conversion is upgraded from the original Quadcast S. Instead of 16-bit, we now have 32-bit conversion with up to 192 kilohertz sample rate. You've been listening to the Quadcast 2S recording in 32-bit at 48 kilohertz. I will comment on the conversion and the sample rates when we get into the pros and cons later. Physically on the mic, we still have a capacitive mute button on the top, but the other controls have changed from the original. To select the polar pattern, we now hold down the multi-function dial on the front instead of having a separate dial on the back. The multi-function dial also controls the microphone gain, the headphone volume, and your monitor mix. You blend between how much of your computer versus how much of your direct monitoring you want to hear. The Quadcast 2S comes in the shock mount, but it can be removed, although I'm not honestly sure why you would remove it because it has no mounting points on it, so there's no way to attach it to a mic stand without the shock mount. The shock mount comes attached to a desktop stand in the box, which is a little bit short considering you want this to be generally only a few inches away from your mouth. If you're on the shorter side like me, then it could be okay if your desk is higher. I'm honestly kind of slouching a little bit to make sure it's closer to my mouth. It also comes with a 3-meter USB-C to USB-C cable with a USB-A adapter, but it does not come with a pop filter. And lastly, before we run through some tests and comparisons, we're going to talk about the software. Now, when it was first launched in 2024, HyperX advertised pretty detailed software control over the Quadcast 2S, including a multi-band EQ and a limiter, which of course would be pretty cool to have. Unfortunately, those features still have not materialized. Alright, so here is the Ingenuity software. As you can see on the left, once it identifies the HyperX Quadcast 2S, you can see it on the left here where it says microphone, so select that, and it will pop open the settings. On the top, we have 2 tabs. We have audio and lights. Right now, you can adjust the mic volume, the mute, the output volume, and the monitor playback mix, and these are controls we have right on the microphone, so that's nothing extra there. As far as audio adjustments, we have a high-pass filter here. That's the only thing right now that you can only control in the software. You can't control this with the hardware. We also can change the polar pattern over here to the right, but again, we have a physical control on the mic for that. So let's test the high-pass filter while we're here. It is currently off, and if we check the box, now the high-pass filter is on. It seems to be a fairly gentle high-pass filter. Now let's do a quick test here with the high-pass filter to see how much it helps remove the rumble from bumping your desk or bumping the mic stand. I'm taking it back off. So now it's back off. I'm going to tap on the stand, and then I'm going to turn it on so you can hear the difference. All right, so I'm tapping the actual desk stand for the Quadcast 2S. All right, and now the high-pass filter is on. One more time, off, on. When it comes to the light customization here, it is on the default setting here. You do have quite a bit of control here. You can add an effect. For example, we can go with a solid light. We can go with blinking. We can go with cycling through different colors. Now you can change the actual colors within each effect. That's why you can add separate ones. So you can have 2 wave features. For example, the default one looks like this. The second one here, I could change so that I'm actually just going to squish the colors together to the right here. And then I click on Save to Microphone. So that's pretty cool. You can adjust the angle there. You can also change the speed. You can make it really slow. You can make it faster. So now I've got this like 3 different effects here. You can get really creative and granular with it. I could spend all day just playing around with this, but this is pretty cool that they give you this level of control. All right, we already tested out the high-pass filter when we were checking out the software, but let's run through some more tests with the Quadcast 2S, and we're going to start with the polar pattern test. This is the cardioid mode, and it is kind of off-axis now. It's directly in front of me. This is the strongest area for the pickup pattern. However, talking straight at it, well, plosives, you'll see in a second. I'm going to turn this around now so that you can hear how the polar pattern kind of falls off in the rear. This should be the dead spot, and now we should be hearing a little bit more on the other side. And then we're back to the front. All right, now we're in the omnidirectional polar pattern, so it's going to be picking up my voice because I'm in front of it, but it's also going to be picking up all the sound from all over the room. So you're going to hear probably an increase in the sort of ambient sound from the room here. I'm going to spin it around so you can hear if the tone changes at all. It shouldn't change on omnidirectional. It should sound the same all the way around the microphone. There we go. Now this is the stereo polar pattern, so if I talk directly in front of it, you should still hear the same. My voice should sound centered, but if I move to one side, you should hear more of my voice on one side, and then if I move to the other side, you should hear more of my voice on the other side. This can be useful for recording music, recording ASMR, but otherwise probably don't want to use this for dialogue because you can really throw people off by having your voice coming out one side of their headphones and then the other one. That can be a little weird. And lastly, this is the bidirectional mode. This picks up sound in the front and in the back, but not from the side. So if I turn it sideways, there should be a dead spot there. And if I turn it to the back, you should hear my voice clearly again. And then if I turn it to the other side, you should hear another dead spot. And now back to the front, you should hear me again. All right, now we did a couple of bump tests earlier when we were testing out the high-pass filter, but just to give you an idea of the difference here between the bumps on a boom arm, again, high-pass filter is off. This is desk bumps. This is stand bumps. This is shock mount bumps. This is body of the microphone bumps. All right, and now I've got the Quadcast 2S on a boom arm, which is still attached to this desk, and I will bump the desk to see if that changes how much of the bumps come through. I'll tap on the boom arm itself. And again, just tap on the shock mount a little bit. Now here's just a quick sample of a typing test with the HyperX Quadcast 2S in cardioid mode on a boom arm. And here's how that sounds with it on a boom arm, positioned nice and close to my mouth and up and off the desk. All right, now for a quick plosive test going straight into the microphone without an external pop filter. Peter picked my podcast. All right, let's do a quick test of the mute button. So I'm going to go ahead. Now I'm talking again. You can hear me again. And now I'm talking again. If you're a little aggressive with it, you might... There was a little bit of a more aggressive touch of the capacitive mute button. We'll also do some samples of the different sample rates that are available on the 2S. Two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. Two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. Two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. Okay, now we're going to do a quick comparison to some other microphones, including other Quadcast models and maybe 4 or 5 competitors. All of these are going to be recorded over USB with no post-processing other than normalizing the level. Next up, we have the original HyperX Quadcast. This is not the Quadcast S, this is just the regular Quadcast. I don't have the original Quadcast S, but both this microphone and the original Quadcast S have 16-bit 48 kilohertz conversion, so it should sound relatively similar to the Quadcast S. It has the same 4 polar patterns that you control with a dial on the back instead of a dial on the front. And as far as other physical controls, it does have that annoying gain dial that's part of the bottom of the microphone that you can bump and move, and also there's no scale on it that makes any sense. So the physical controls on here, not quite as good in my opinion as the physical controls on the new Quadcast 2 and 2S. There you go, sample of the original Quadcast to compare to the Quadcast 2 and 2S. We're back on the HyperX Quadcast 2S. Just to remind you what it sounds like, let's move on to the next microphone. Next up, we have the HyperX Quadcast 2. This has an MSRP of $149, so $50 less than the 2S. I have seen it discounted to about $120 occasionally already. It has the same 4 polar patterns as the 2S. The conversion is 24-bit, and the sample rate is up to 96 kilohertz. It does have the same multi-function dial as the 2S, however, the LEDs work just a little bit differently. It does not have the multicolor RGB lighting on around the grill or on the top of the microphone. It does have the same capacitive mute button on the top, and overall it's actually a little bit smaller of a microphone compared to the Quadcast 2S. So on screen, it actually takes up a little bit less space. Back on the HyperX Quadcast 2S again as a reminder of what it sounds like. So let's move on and do another microphone. Next up, we have the Elgato Wave 3, another microphone that has a desk stand that is way too short. This really should be on a boom arm. This has an MSRP of $149. You can pretty easily, regularly find it for about $120 if you look around. It is cardioid only. The conversion is 24-bit and the sample rate is maximum 96 kilohertz. The Wave 3 also, of course, has Stream Deck integration. So if you have an Elgato Stream Deck, you can set up actions, functions to do different things with your microphone processing and routing and stuff like that. So there's quite a lot of software features available if you're using the Wave 3. HyperX Quadcast 2S again, refresher of how this one sounds. Let's move on and do the next microphone. Now this is the Rode NTUSB Plus. I would put it on the desk stand that it comes with, but I can't find it. Now this is a $169 USB microphone. It is cardioid only. The conversion is 24-bit and the sample rate is 48 kilohertz. It does not have higher sample rates available. It does, however, come with this attached pop filter to protect better against plosives. It does have some software features available, including some processing. I'll put on the screen the software features. They are retained in the microphone though, so if you enable any software processing, any of the DSP, it will stay there even if you disconnect the mic and plug it into another device, which is nice. And another refresher of the sound of the Quadcast 2S. Here's how it's sounding. Let's do our next comparison. All right, our last comparison microphone is the SteelSeries Alias. This has an MSRP right now of $176, so it is the closest in price to the Quadcast 2S. It is cardioid only, so no multiple polar patterns. The conversion is 24-bit with a max sample rate of 48 kilohertz. Now, where the SteelSeries Alias differentiates itself is in the software. SteelSeries has the Sonar software, which is available on Windows only, like the Ingenuity software, but there are definitely a lot more audio features currently in Sonar compared to Ingenuity. So if you have a Windows PC and you're looking for something that does that more advanced processing for you, the SteelSeries Alias does include that. But let me know in the comments how you like the raw sound of all of these microphones compared to the Quadcast 2S. Now let's move on and talk about some pros and cons for the Quadcast 2S. All right, starting off with some pros here. Generally, the speaking dialogue sound quality is good. I know that's subjective, but I don't hear anything too objectionable here for dialogue purposes. The highs are not overly harsh. There's a little bit of low-end presence. It's not particularly rounded in the low end, but it's also not boomy. And the mids are not too nasal sounding. Now, as with any mic, it really depends on your voice, but I've certainly heard worse in terms of general tone and frequency response for a USB condenser mic. And the headphone output is also fairly usable here. I tried it out with a few different sets of headphones, and it seems fine for general playback, which is good because you want to be able to both monitor the mic and also listen to your computer playback without being annoyed by a lot of noise. Now, the capacitive mute button is also useful, and while it is occasionally audible when you're pressing it, it's not like you get, I don't hear any loud clicks or popping sounds, so you shouldn't have to worry about any real negative noises when you're muting and unmuting unless you accidentally hit the mic too hard with your hand, but that's kind of a thing no matter what mic you're using. And as for the fully customizable RGB, I will say this is something that I normally would put in the neutral category because not everybody wants or cares about lighting on a microphone, including me, but honestly, this is kind of nicely implemented, and it's cool how much you can do to customize it. So as long as you have a Windows computer, you can use that Ingenuity software to customize the lighting. I don't know if HyperX is going to come out with software for Mac anytime soon, but if you're a Mac user, you're kind of out of luck and you're just stuck on the default mode. Now, the last pro, while small, is worth mentioning. The USB cable comes with both C and A connections because, well, that's nice. You don't have to rummage through your drawer to find an adapter for different devices. I like it when they give you both a C and an A connection. All right, now let's talk about a few things in the neutral category. These are things that could be a pro, a con, or just something you don't care about. It depends on your priorities and your point of view. So first in this category, let's address the 32-bit conversion. This is not 32-bit float. So that means you cannot record with this mic and get really loud and then recover the audio after the fact without any distortion. It's not the same thing. The audio quality is perfectly fine on 24-bit mode, and on the subjective side of things, I really don't hear any appreciable difference between the 32-bit recordings and the 24-bit recordings from this microphone. So this feature is in the neutral category because this higher spec conversion of the 2S doesn't really seem to add or take away anything compared to the regular Quadcast 2, except for the fact that you might be paying more for something that's not necessary. And if you do look at it that way, then it could lean towards being a con. Now, the other two things I have in the neutral category truly are more neutral. They are features that can indeed be helpful or even necessary, but a lot of people may not need them. When it comes to the higher sample rates of the Quadcast 2S, if you're using the mic only for dialogue purposes, meaning you're using it for gaming, streaming, podcasting, video calls, that sort of thing, 48 kilohertz is really all you need. If you do record a lot of varied sources, then having those higher sample rates available to you can be useful. They're just not really necessary for most of the use cases that this microphone is made and marketed for. But that doesn't mean some people won't find them useful. Now, when we talk about the multiple polar patterns, it's a very similar story here. These can be useful in certain situations, especially if you are recording multiple people. But again, if you're going to be using your mic only for single-person dialogue, like I'm doing right now, it's pretty much going to be staying in cardioid mode the vast majority of the time, so those polar patterns might be a feature that you just don't need. All right, lastly, let's talk about some cons for the Quadcast 2S. Pretty much all of my cons are at least somewhat related to the price of this microphone. For $200, it should be doing all of the basics well. With that in mind, the first con is that it doesn't come with a proper pop filter. The internal pop filter is really just a very thin layer of foam inside the grill here that really doesn't block plosives, as you heard. You can definitely avoid it most of the time by using proper mic technique like this, and you're talking past the capsule rather than talking into it. But keep in mind, this mic is marketed towards users who tend to get kind of lively around the microphone, like in a gaming scenario. So it's likely being used in situations where it's easy to forget about proper mic technique. And for $200, I think it should come with this clip-on pop filter that HyperX sells separately. The next con is, again, a basic thing that it doesn't do very well, and that is shock rejection. It comes with what appears to be a well-designed shock mount, meaning it's not overly bulky, and it appears to isolate the microphone from the mount, just by looking at it. But in my testing, it really doesn't seem to do a great job of passively absorbing vibrations, whether it's on the desk stand or on a boom arm. The high-pass filter that's available to turn on definitely helps to reduce the resonance of those bumps, but this isn't a low-priced microphone where you can kind of justify that as an excuse for below-average performance. Now, another con currently is the compatibility, and this is something that HyperX can probably change with a firmware update, but when you check out the product page on their website, they indicate that the Quadcast 2S is only compatible with Windows and Mac, which is fine if you do your gaming on a Windows PC, but it doesn't say anything about gaming consoles. However, if you check out the page for the regular Quadcast 2, you'll notice it not only lists Windows and Mac, but it also indicates compatibility with PS4 and 5, Nintendo Switch, and Steam Deck. So for the more expensive 2S to not support gaming consoles, that doesn't really make sense. But like I said, maybe they can improve that with a firmware update. The last con is interesting here because to me, it's both the biggest downside that I see with the Quadcast 2S, and it's also something HyperX can still fix, because it's the software. With only a high-pass filter to customize the sound in the Ingenuity software, there is nothing differentiating the more expensive 2S from the regular Quadcast 2 in terms of audio features. You also have to yet again consider that for the price, the fact that there's no version for Mac OS of the software also kind of stinks. So it may have become obvious already, but right now it is hard for me to recommend the Quadcast 2S. To me, it feels like you're paying more for some features that aren't going to be necessary for a lot of people, and also software features that aren't even there yet if you just compare it to the Quadcast 2. However, if the software does actually catch up here and it offers some useful features, then I would say maybe I could recommend it, especially if a top priority for you is the customizable RGB lighting and you do have a need for higher sample rates or multiple polar patterns. Now, if you don't need multiple polar patterns, consider the mics I mentioned earlier, like the Rode NTUSB Plus or the Elgato Wave 3. And that's not even to mention some great dynamic mics out there if you don't have your heart set on a condenser mic. Check the description for links to some more reviews if you're interested. So that'll do it for this video. Let me know what you think of the Quadcast 2S. Let me know if you picked one up for yourself and how you're liking it. Don't forget to subscribe to the Semi-Pro Tech+Gear channel, and while you're here, check out one of these videos. I know you'll enjoy it. Thanks, everybody. See you next time.